Hello everyone, and welcome to tonight's event with James Rhee, author of Red Helicopter, a parable for our times, lead change with kindness plus a little math. James will be in conversation with school librarian Jean Stehle. My name is Lily Weitzman, and I am a programming librarian here at the library. I'd like to thank New TV for filming today's program, and Newtonville Books for selling copies of Red Helicopter. James will be available to sign books following the program. And now I'm pleased to introduce tonight's speakers. James Rhee is an acclaimed CEO, educator, investor, and founder. His national best-selling book, Red Helicopter, offers a future-forward operating system for holistic success that centers applied agency and bridges math with emotions in the business of life and the life of business. In recognition of his prescient and unlikely 7-year partnership with the women of Ashley Stewart, a business serving and employing primarily Black women across America, Howard University named him the Johnson Chair of Entrepreneurship in 2021. He also holds appointments at MIT Sloan School of Management and Duke Law School. James's transformational leadership has been recognized by the private and public sectors. Jean Stehle is a school librarian, writer, and educational consultant. A graduate of Ithaca College and Columbia University, she works for Newton Public Schools as a middle school librarian. Jean takes pride in fostering an inclusive library where facts matter and all students are book lovers, even if they don't know it yet. Jean has consulted for PBS Learning Media on various civic space projects. She is also revising her coming of middle-age novel. Jean lives outside Boston with her one husband, 2 children, and countless books. Welcome, James and Jean.
That's nice. That's funny. I have to use that.
I know.
My one wife.
Just to clarify, in case there were. Well, first off, thank you to the Newton Free Library. Thank you to Newtonville Books. Thank you to New TV. And most importantly, thank you to each of you. We know how challenging it can be on a weekday night to come out, right, to rally and go for it. And we're so happy that you're here to talk about this book. James, you and I were talking before things began, and we were talking about how your book it's difficult to classify. In fact, the librarian in me thought, is it a memoir? Is it in the 300s? Is it in the 600s? 658.046 maybe? How would you describe this book that's a part business guide, part financial literacy tool, part memoir, cultural reflection? What do you say to people when they ask?
You would think I would have a good answer to something I still don't. I think it's just a celebration of humanity. I think the book is about humanity. And I wrote it this way on purpose. It was not easy to get it published this way because everyone's hell-bent on classifying things into zeros and ones and zeros. So the book necessarily had to be like algorithmically challenged. It's just busting algorithms. Like I don't know where it's supposed to go. And I think that's the point, that we should not do that to ourselves or to other people. And it's, so in order to make that message, the structure of the book had to be consonant with that message. So I don't know what it is. I think it's definitely a humanities book, and it's reminding people that every discipline that we study and do and research and advance, the main prism should be toward a goal of advancing humanity. And that once you divorce that end goal with a discipline, that we have danger. And that's one of the core messages.
Tell us about the title of the book, because again, it naturally speaks to the humanity in that moment.
Yeah, it was also beguiling because a lot of people didn't want to name it this. They said, "What's Red Helicopter?" No one will buy it. No one will know what it is. And I'm like, oh, okay, good. Like, it should be like a song so that it should pass like a folk song. And that people will sing it. If it's a good song, people will sing it, people will hear it, and that it needs to be longitudinal in growth. So it's purposefully ambiguous, and there's no helicopter on the cover, because it's metaphoric. I'm asking each person to have their own red helicopter story. And then for me, the story was literally a red helicopter, and it's a story where, you want me to tell it briefly, or?
Do you mind?
You know, it's just quickly, it's a story when I was 5, and I had courage, and I trusted my intuition, and I thought, I think I was wise. And this was before I was probably still wetting the bed, okay? And I was wise, and I had no formal education, and but everyone told me that I was wrong, that it was not okay to share half my lunch with my friend, and his dad came to give me lunch for that. Or my parents, they thought they were wrong, that in America they didn't know that they thought it was a custom that everyone gave gifts at Christmas. And I kept saying I'm the only one who got one. And I really stood up to my dad, because he was testing me. He's like, why are you giving half your lunch away that your mom makes every morning? And he was sort of testing me. And I stood my ground, and I remember, with the flushed cheeks and the bowl cut, looking at my dad and saying, why wouldn't I give half my lunch to my friend? He didn't have any. I didn't know my friend's mom had died that summer. I didn't know anything. I just knew there was a problem, that my friend didn't have lunch, and I had some. And I gave him half. And I got a reward for it, not even knowing why I got it. But I remember the feeling I had in my chest when I was told that that's why. And it's something that I really tried to keep with me, despite the fact that I also had to, quote, be successful in, quote, conventional terms. And like being a red helicopter kid is not exactly a recipe for success in private equity at Harvard. It's not. And I never wanted to not be that guy. And so the book is about that struggle. And then me in my 40s, as my parents were both dying, figuring out all the things I learned as an adult, to then have it through the red helicopter prism, and all the things that I would have to unlearn and then reapply again. And so that is the story of Red Helicopter. Yeah.
It's so beautiful because, like you said, you weren't taught certain things, but intrinsically, I believe that as humans, especially when you see it in little ones, they sense, they feel, they know. You saw a friend at the lunch table that didn't have anything, and without processing, thinking, it's here you go. And yet you weren't expecting anything in return. It's what you do. You mentioned that it was difficult when you were talking with, it sounds like your publisher, like how do we, like what lane does this book belong in? And you posted something on LinkedIn today, a screenshot when your book first came out. It's a bestseller, congrats on that. And you have...
Is it the Elon?
Yes.
Okay, I'm going to it.
And so, on Amazon, at one point, Elon Musk's, Walter Isaacson's biography about Elon Musk was the #1 bestseller for biographies of business professionals. That's one entity on the left. And then you have the juxtaposition of the #2 spot is Red Helicopter. And your leadership style is night and day from Mr. Musk's. And I was wondering what you thought, what you felt when you saw those two books side by side.
Yeah, I laughed. It's funny. It's funny, and like even on the bio side, it's worth pointing out. The juxtaposition of MIT and Howard. It makes perfect sense to me, and that's part of the point of all this, right? That it's this juxtaposition, being comfortable with like contradiction or seeming contradiction. But yeah, I think that what we did together, me and the women at Ashley, was very innovative and prescient, and I think we were 20 years ahead of the world in what our predictions. And so in that sense, it was innovative, But I think the innovation that we didn't revel in the innovation. What we reveled in was the fact that I think we accomplished a lot of very positive things for people. And we used technology and math adroitly. Like this was not, hey, let's just dance and do cartwheels in the fields. We used like the cutting edge neuro, positive psychology, org theory. We did all of these things. But that's not what we bragged about. That was just the ingredients in the soup. What we were most proud of was the way that the soup tasted, right? That, like, bragging about innovation for innovation's sake. I think we are worshiping false idols, like bragging about innovation that solves a problem, that advances humanity, great. And I think that's one of the things that, that's why people giggle. Like, I got a lot of emails. Like, it's literally people chortling about this. And he's a very bright man, no doubt, right? This is not, like, he's done a lot of incredible things. But I think the book is also very much stressing about how one does things is perhaps equal, if not more important than the actual end result. The how lasts for a long time, right? So being right and then making people feel stupid, that has long-term negative externality and negative consequences. And so there's a way to be innovative and bright and future forward, but bringing everyone along with it and asking people to be part of the solution rather than being prescriptive in nature.
One of the themes I took away from the book is identity, and you explore your identity professionally, personally. Let's take a few steps back, and I want to know, as you Harvard undergrad, you taught for 2 years with the intention of teaching students that perhaps might not pursue college, right? And then you go to Harvard Law with the intention of being a public defender.
Yep.
And then from there, when you're at Harvard Law, you realize you're really interested in business, and you didn't let the fact that you were in one school hold you back from putting yourself out there in the business world. You end up being very successful, in traditional terms, very successful. And so when you mention Ashley, and Ashley is of Ashley Stewart, and I love how there's a turning point in the book where Ashley Stewart is no longer a company, it's an entity, represents these women. Can you walk everyone through here? How do you go from being a senior investment professional in private equity, and you admittedly say in the book, your fashion sense, you weren't known as a fashionista, right? Mm-hmm. And you identify as a Korean American man. So with all of those components, how do you end up leading a retail company that serves low to moderate income, plus size Black women?
Well, I'm not big on titles, boxes, credentials, and things like that. I have found them to be, I don't want to underestimate the importance of them as a public high school kid, son of first-generation immigrants. Up until I was 18, I had nothing on my resume other than dishwasher at Red Lobster, busboy at Village Way, and incoming freshman at Harvard. Harvard was the first credential I ever had that had actually meaning in this country. And so I don't want to underestimate and sort of say poo-poo like credentials, but going to Harvard, it proves that I did well in school 30-something years ago. Mm-hmm. What am I going to do with it? That's my choice, right? So I think the main thing for me is that when I was a kid, there are two things. When I was like Harold in the Purple Crayon, I truly was. Like I did really well in school because I loved it. Like I loved to read, I loved music, I was very curious. I read everything, played everything, was friends to all. I was literally the boy who shared half his lunch. That was my way. My parents were not, they didn't have to tell me to do things. I just loved it. that changed as I got older. Then it started to be, oh, I have to do well for this reason. I have to learn that to get a job. It just changed. And the other thing that was important, I'm going to get to how this came about, the other single defining thing growing up was me and my mother. I was, my mom, and she was we were very, very close. And she wanted me to be, quote, successful because she made a lot of sacrifices in her life. Some of them without her agency, like they were just forced upon her. And so she and I used to argue, and I would say, Mom, like, don't live through me. And so there are many times in the book I actually went and defended my mother physically when she was getting crap, and I just wouldn't take it. And she was like, don't do that. I'm like, I'm not going to stand here. And so she was like, oh my gosh. So I have that in me. I don't like it when I see bully people. I don't like it. I'll take it. When I see it, it just is something, it's my personality. It is my mom. So anyway, those were the two things. And then as I got older, to be successful, it had to also mean, in that time, at least in my own head, some of the things that were sort of distinctive about my upbringing, about being Korean, were not markers of success on Wall Street. I was the only one who looked like this in most of the rooms I've been in my life, including as a published nonfiction leadership book author, even today. Okay, and so all those things were in my mind, and some of the sort of superficial successes, they started to feel hollow. Like, it's this, what am I doing? Remember, I taught high school, and I was going to be a public defender. Like, money has, I know how to use it, and I know how to make it. We didn't grow up with it, and so it's not been like some sort of sacred cow I've worshipped. I just have it. And then in my 40s, and it all changed. I was a father of 3, and Will and Sarah know this, and my dad's dying. My mom's literally carrying my dad inside their little apartment because they keep firing all the people I'm trying to hire for them to help. And my mom's like, shit, I don't want them in my house. And all the money in the world doesn't solve that. So your dad's dying, and your mom's sitting there looking at him. And then there's this company called Ashley Stewart, and the women look nothing like my mother, except inside they're exactly like my mother. They do everything, right? They take care of their family. Many of them were single mothers, and they're tired, And sometimes they gaslight themselves because they're the whole world's gaslighting them, and they're like, why is this so hard? And the game is not set up for Ashley Stewart women to easily win. Let's be real about it. And neither was it for my mother. But at that point in my 40s, I knew enough, I had enough skills and relationships to know systems deconstruction. And I had the same conversation with the women of Ashley Stewart as I had with my mom at the kitchen table. Mom, it's not you, it's them. It's not you. And this time I was able to do it, and it wasn't just a boy with a bowl cut. I knew what I was doing. And so, so that's why I did it. It was supposed to be just for 6 months. It ended up being my entire 40s because the world didn't believe us. That's it. And so it was me and these women alone for 7 years, basically. And I think the world is now understanding what we did. The consciousness of the world was, they didn't understand what we were really doing, but now they do. And that's why it's accelerating right now.
I was so moved by, as a woman myself, as a mother, granted I identify as white, I have plenty of privilege. I was really moved that you could see beyond race to peel back the layers to look at human beings who are not accepted in, who are not allowed to be a part of the group, and to make the connection between your mother and these women at Ashley Stewart, boots on the ground, doing hard work. I thought it's such a beautiful example that we are one. right? And the fact that you could see that in the moment and tap into it is just so inspiring. And I wonder, do you mind going to the slide with the Colin Powell and Condoleezza?
Oh, yes.
So there's this picture that James will be sharing. Okay, this made me chortle in a way, to borrow your,
That one?
it was, oh yeah,
Yeah.
see the one that's top right? Okay, so,
There's Will.
hey.
Will's one of my college roommates. There he
Yeah,
is.
Will.
The tall guy in the middle.
Oh my gosh, with the maroon?
Yes.
All right.
Darker hair.
He looks the same.
If you look at the top right, you were recognized for advancing Black pathways, this advisory council, and you're sandwiched in between Colin Powell and Condoleezza Rice.
And below Kevin Hart.
Oh, right, we can't forget Kevin Hart. And I mean, at first glance, if people didn't know your story, they'd be like, what the what? Like, was this like a mistake? And of course we know it isn't. And like, this is what it's all about. It's the allyship, it's showing up and being human. And I wonder for you, was it, you led through kindness, and that's one of the subtitle of the book. It's one thing to say, okay, I see these women that either shop at Ashley, that work at Ashley. So it's one thing to say, hey, I see you, I know how difficult your life is, but it's another thing to then roll up your sleeves, sharpen your pencil, and say, okay, what can we do here? How did that come about?
Yeah, it's, so you have to picture in August 2013, I was 42, 43 years old, and yeah, I was in the right place in my life. As I said before, my dad's dying. I was not a boy anymore. I was in my early 40s. I've been punched enough in the face. Life is not easy. And I was like, oh, this is how the game works. And then I was surprised, not that surprised, but surprised how callously people were talking about this company in my private equity Wall Street spheres. Right? It's beyond gender and race. It's also whatever. It's a company. It's a portfolio company. Who cares? And that's how detached financial capital has become from human capital in our society. It's a callousness. These are real jobs, real relationships, real third rails for people, to be in. And there was also misogyny and racism in the comments too, right? Oh, it's not Tory Burch, like things like that. And I was like, you can't say that. And I remember those comments. I heard them about my mother. Like, I remember. And so I volunteered for 6 months. Will knows, Will helped me sort of make sure that there was an escape hatch to come back. Because I thought after 6 months, it was 6 weeks away from obliteration, but I'm an experienced investor, distressed. I know what I'm doing. I thought for sure I could find someone to put some money in, I could come home, and I could go on with my life. But in 6 months, so first of all, it was like living through my parents' immigration journey. Everything that I had built for 42 years was meaningless. The minute I stepped foot to be interim CEO of this company that served plus-size Black women, twice bankrupt, I was treated a certain way. And I was alone. Like, you have to pick, I was alone. Like, no friends, I was solo, race-wise, there weren't many men. I was alone. And no one knew where I went. And it was just an experience, and I was like naked, basically. And so in that time, there were people who really disappointed me. I thought for sure people would come and help me, and they didn't. And the only people that really had my back were they were a handful in the corporate headquarters, but it was particularly the black women in the stores. And I'm very grateful. And so that's why I ended up staying, because after 6 months, I knew I was very confident in the vision for the company and the world, but I was really confident in the relationship I had with the women. I knew it was real. And it's a really good feeling in your 40s when you're stripped naked, you've got no credentials anymore. These women, they like me. They accepted me, like it was, and they're like, we like you. And I was like, I like you. And they knew. And like later on, I asked them, I said, how come you trusted me? And women get burned a lot. I think women of color get burned a lot. Right, they're false promises. And they said to me, they said, oh, we could feel your heart. We knew that you would fight to the death. And I'm like, yep. They knew. And in the book I write, the women used to say, you have so much soul. Like we can feel it. In Korean, that word is chong. It's an indescribable, not algorithmic, unAIable, not quantifiable human quality. In my TED Talk, I talk about goodwill. There's no English equivalent of that word. And the book also explores that concept of limitations of language, right? There's certain things you cannot describe in words, and you certainly can't put it in a formula. And so that's why I stayed. It was just, I was grateful for them. I gradually understood that these women represented metaphorically my mother. It wasn't like a eureka in the first day, but over time I'm like, oh, I get a chance to basically relive my childhood with my mom, except they call me CEO. It really was like that, and that they spoke fluent English and my mom didn't. And so we were really finally able to have certain conversations, and they were able to express some hurt and things that my mom couldn't. And I was able to say some things to my mother, meaning them, that I couldn't. And it was beautiful. And so I stayed. And so after the whole world rejected us, I called in some favors and raised some money, and I stayed. And it was really happy, hanging jewelry. We had potlucks, and we were eating in the back rooms, and we were just really lovely. And it's, for the first time in a long time, I was doing things like I did, like as Harold in the Purple Crayon. It was for all the right reasons. I was learning new things and like applying things, because I just wanted these women to win so badly. Like I was like, there's no freaking way they're not gonna win on their terms. They're gonna win. And it was I think for 7 years, I think I'm a very flawed person. Ask Will, he knows many of them. But for 7 years, I think it's fair to say, like, they got about as good a version of me as I can possibly be for 7 years, until my mom died. And so that's, at that point when you hit that stage in like a certain state, and you see yourself, and you're like, geez, this is really a good version of yourself. You never not want to be that person. I don't ever want to not be that man ever again. Like I experienced what James was at his best. And so that's also, which was not perfect.
Sure.
But it was a really good version of me. And so that's also the gift that I got from the women of Ashley Stewart, and clearly that's what my mom gave me, her whole life.
If you haven't read the book yet, that when you describe visiting the stores, when we get to know as readers the women of Brickchurch.
Yeah.
Okay, I don't know why they are. It is such a joyful experience as a reader to see these women feel seen by someone in corporate, right? Probably ever. And it felt so good. I felt like an extension of them in a way, like, yes, look, finally. And so in turn, I was infuriated, and a part of the book, when corporate decides that they want to cut communication between, so you have the women, the boots on the ground, so to speak, that have a pulse on who the customer is, what they need, what they want, why they come into the store. And it's not just about the articles of clothing, right? And so some people at corporate decide, you know what, we're going to cut those lines of communication. We can figure it out. And as a reader in that moment, I mean, I was bubbling over because it felt classist, it felt racist, it felt sexist, and you were able to not only reinstate, but prove to those individuals that thought that was a good idea, that they were wrong.
Yeah.
And I'm wondering, because this book is a parable, it is a tool to teach, do you think that the people who thought they didn't need to hear from those women in the stores, do you think that they learned a lesson? Do you think that they made different choices going forward?
Well, some of them didn't, and then they were not asked to be part of the company going forward. This is a performance culture, right? Kindness and math, what that means is truth, right? It's kindness, math, no politics, no crap. It's just truth. Let's get to the right answer and let's do what we can. So some of them didn't make it. They were given a lot of opportunities to do so. And then some of them, yeah, they did see the light because, I'm a teacher at heart. Teachers are responsible for people learning. It's not usually the student's fault. It's a really good it's the teacher's fault. You have to be able to communicate in 40 different ways. And that's why the book is music, it's math, it's physics, it's all of these things. I was like, I'll meet you where you are. But if you try, I have to figure out a way to get you to know. And so some people, they just were taught wrong. So this semester, next semester, I'm keynoting the Business School Dean's Conference. And people are starting to catch wind of my curriculum. I'm like, we're not teaching people correctly. Like, I don't blame people when they learn the wrong paradigms of leadership, because how long did we sort of put Jack Welch up on a statue and like worship it, and then you realize after 30, 40 years the numbers are awful. Like, it's not the student's fault. And so we are in a time now, you're an educator, where it's the paradigm of education. Are we teaching the right mental models? And so that's one of the big things here too, that, the other thing, this was not planned, this was serendipitous. But my whole curriculum in the schools, but also in the schools of business, I'm asking people to be a helicopter, not an airplane. I'm literally getting people to try to unlearn that success means like jet. I think success means being a helicopter, to be agile, to fly in 6 different directions, to have the power of vertical lift, to be able to land anywhere. And it's a way of being and also a way of thinking, and particularly for the younger folks in the audience, where career paths and sort of paths of success are really going to be quite zigzaggy. You have to be agile, like a helicopter. To be a single direction, monodirectional airplane that requires a long runway to land and to take off, I don't think that's going to be successful for young people. And so this mental model is like, if we're not giving people the right mental models for certain things, it's almost not their fault. And so a lot of the book is sort of, there are like 8 to 10 things I kind of eviscerate in the book that are sort of traditional knowledge, traditional ways of thinking, and I just eviscerate them. In a nice way, I'm saying I don't think that that's true. And so to the employees at Ashley Stewart who couldn't adjust, they were given a lot of time. And if I couldn't get them to learn, I tried and tried again, but at some point if the student also doesn't want to learn, then they can't stay. And so we were asked to leave.
One thing in education, we talk about making thinking visible, having students explain how they solved the problem, how they've come up with potential solutions. And one thing I really appreciated about what you did in this book is you make the invisible visible. You have very user-friendly ways of communicating with students as young as middle school to adults, whether you are well-versed in the world of business and finance. And I wanted to know, what was that like for you to take sophisticated ideas and put them in very accessible ways that your students, your readers, can understand and make meaning of?
It was the hardest part of the book was doing that, because there is complexity in the book. I think that what people tell me is that they read it once and then it's like, what? And because the narrative, it reads, it's like a story, it's like a movie, but then it's like, oh my gosh, he's really saying that. And now I'm going to read it as a business person. Now I'm going to read it as a parent. Now I'm going to read it as a human. There are many different ways to read it. So I tried to write. My writing, it's like a lawyer / it's too complicated. And so I had to start again, and so I used music. So the book is written, it took me 3-4 years to write the book, partly because I was grieving my mother's sudden passing, but partly because I didn't know how to express, these are systems, it's systems ideas. And so the first part of it took 3 years to write the music, and then the book is the lyrics. So the book is structured as a piece of music. It's written as like a serenade / anthem in E flat major. Right, there are 3 parts, there's a bridge, and it literally is written in E flat major. And then I wrote the words, and so like getting the music down, like the core emotional journey, helped me first. What did I want people to experience emotionally? And part of that is an awakening journey, because you have to have sadness and loss to unlearn. So that's that. And then I wrote the lyrics, and instead of writing it, I spoke it. I spoke the book. And then I then put those lyrics onto a page, and then rewrote the lyrics and made it more sort of in written form, but I had to verbalize it. So it was almost like singing the book. And that's how I did it. And that's actually how I lead in real life, in the company or anything. You don't write things, I speak. And I'm able to teach things like simply that way. So I was like, I gotta write the book that way. So that's how it's done. I use a lot of illustrations. There's an illustrator from Korea, her name is Haeyeon Cho. She's very talented, so it's like, the book is written in counterpoint. It's like Western Bruce Springsteen rock, and it's also like Korean folk. It's literally in counterpoint. So we used very like cute illustrations and to make things accessible. So that's accounting, that's like a T accounting, except she wrote it in her very Haeyeon sort of aesthetic. And all of a sudden accounting doesn't look so intimidating anymore. Right? And it reminds you how human it is, and it reminds you that accounting is completely made up by humans. It's not physics. It's a made-up measurement tool. And so it also is a sort of an anthem for change, because anything that's written and looks human means you can change it. And so I'm reminding people that accounting is a complete fiction. What we value in companies is made up. We can decide how to measure things differently if we decide to do it. And that is what we did, right? That does explain why this twice bankrupt business, for a demographic that's very challenged, in 3 years we rewired the entire game. And we're sitting there keynoting like the tech conferences, the retail conferences. All of a sudden everyone wanted to know what Ashley Stewart thought, and all of us internally just giggled. We're like, you do? And that was sort of our way. We weren't angry, we weren't mad. It was sort of okay, like come join us then. Like it's like we're having fun, and we're doing it I think, a better way. Do you want to come? Do you want to join us? And I think that's important right now for this. The book is timed to come out this year on purpose. I wanted America to read this book in 2024 and ask people, why are you so mad? Mad, it doesn't lead to good things. Sad is good. Sad and joy are on a continuum. Mad doesn't lead to longitudinally great results. It's not a great catalyst for long-term positive change. So the emotions of sadness and joy, are more fitting, and so that's why this book came out here, and this parable, I think America is the cafeteria. Like when you read the book, the cafeteria is America, and in that moment there was no hope. You had a Korean American guy with no fashion sense sitting there telling his primarily, like it was America, that cafeteria, like every race, and saying, I've never done this before. I don't know, kindness and math. And I think that I'm asking people when they read the book, if you don't have kindness and you don't have mathematical honesty, what do you have? We started from the beginning, we had to. It was just, do you believe in investing in people and creating positive externalities? Do you believe in math? And if you believe in those two things, we got a foundation to rebuild. If you don't believe in those two things, what do we got? And I'm asking this country that right now. And that's, there are pictures all over the place. This book is, this should give you a sense as to where this book is reaching. Right? It's reaching here, it's young people, but it's also, it's reaching, the way the book is spreading, it's almost like it's spreading here, it's spreading in the classrooms of some of the leading colleges, universities, high schools. That's a bunch of headmasters in ASNE, independent schools in New England. They're building red helicopters up on the upper right. Right? And it's spreading here, right? It's spreading in Sony Music, at Gutman Community College, it's with Ashoka, it's in Sweden, it's with the mayor of Newport, but it's also with the CEO of Citigroup. And this book is, it's written in a transcendent language way, and I'm asking people, what do you think? Do you have the courage to really exert agency and to realize that there's some changes that have to happen? And I think the other thing that it's encouraging people, just like kids are, it's really lateral thinking, which is what systems is. Instead, if you think about where a lot of education's heading toward, it's very vertical. Pick a major early, do this, learn this. But I think that most innovation, Elon Musk, even though we teased him in this thing, he's a polymath, right? He's a lateral thinker. We need more polymaths. You need more generalists who know a lot of different disciplines and who know how to connect them. That's where innovation has always happened. But we're pushing kids the opposite way. And the technology is pushing, it's accelerating that. Or just making it even much more binary. And I think we're heading the wrong way. And I think we're going to realize that soon. And that's why things like music, neurologically, music forces your brain to work in ways that very few things force your brain to work. It touches every part of your brain. It's by definition a holistic, system-based catalyst.
I found it ironic that during the pandemic, the way that we as educators encouraged our students to give themselves self-care, to de-stress, was through reading, physical activity, creating art, listening to music, making music. And yet in our educational system, those are extras, right? Those are the first things to be cut. And I love how you speak to music, how you speak to the arts in your book. And I wonder, when you're having these conversations with with different types of stakeholders, are they recognizing that we need to be integrating those disciplines more?
It's yes and no. I think it's yes and no. So much of the messaging is really being careful about language. I know that growing up in an Asian household, look, I'm a creative. But growing up in an Asian household, the word creative was not a celebrated thing, right? It wasn't like, yes, my son's creative. But what else is there in life? What creates real value is creation. Like, creation by definition is value. Unlike a lot of late-stage capitalism, there's no creation, it's skimming, right? You're extracting a margin. It's very different. And so, yeah, I think we have to have people slow down and really think about the language we're using. Is that creation in a financial sense? That means if you're interested in making a lot of money, when you create something new that has value, you make a lot of money. That's what founders and solopreneurs, that's what they do. They create something that didn't exist. We have to sort of think about that. I think arts and music, by definition, you're creating something new that no one's thought of, no one's had. There's not a better example of value creation than that. So, and don't get me going on just the math behind music and architects. A lot of these disciplines that are left, right side blame, like architecture, we should be teaching that more in systems design. It's very difficult to be left, right side, to be able to be an architect, to understand the math behind music theory. It's very complicated. Flying a helicopter, explaining the physics of a helicopter is really complicated. But if you can do it, think about how advanced you have to be to explain how the physics of a helicopter operate. So we're not, these are examples that education systems can be based on, compose a piece of music. Explain the physics of a helicopter. If these are your goals, it forces you to learn 6 to 8 disciplines. Mm-hmm. And your whole pedagogy can be built around these exercises.
Mm-hmm. And I find that it's, as a teacher myself, that it can be tricky because parents understandably want the best for their children, and they were once students themselves, so they have their background knowledge that they're applying, but yet that background knowledge is 20, 30, however many years old.
Yeah.
And so it's interesting how you're going about this in a very organic way. I don't know if you're working with lawmakers at all, or are you finding that it's better to go this holistic route versus having conversations regarding legislation and things like that?
This book just got published in April. I've spent the last 3 years writing the book and then making sure I knew how to teach it pedagogically in a classroom. There's one thing knowing how to do it yourself, mm-hmm. doing it as the CEO of a company or as a private equity owner. It's very different teaching it in a classroom, mm-hmm. right? So if you think about the 3 schools I'm teaching in, they're very different on purpose. It's Duke Law School, it's MIT Business School, and Howard Undergraduate. And that's very intentional. These are 3 very different learning styles, and the book reflects the language that all 3 of those students, not to mention real life adults and CEOs, that they receive the same way. That's why it ended up being a parable. It wasn't meant to be a parable, but then Harvard One read the book and the manuscript. They said, "You wrote a parable." I'm like, "Oh," because by definition that means it has to be like a transcendent narrative. And so that's what I've been doing. And then I've been in these organizations because right now I've got one foot inside the systems and necessarily one foot outside. Like Red Helicopter is not beholden to anybody. Mm-hmm. It's an independent agent. And so it's a truth sayer. No one can tell Red Helicopter what to do. On the other hand, it's friends inside all these organizations. Because in order to make change, there are two ways. You can burn everything down and scream and have violence, or you can open the door from the inside. And that's what I am doing right now, and that's what Red Helicopter is. You're going to see more books, multimedia adaptations. I'm already applying this in certain companies, testing it there where I don't own it, where I'm just like almost guiding. And the Business School Deans Conference that's a big step, right? And so think about the coalition of MIT, Howard, Duke. It's pretty interesting, right? Or ASNE, and so Brené Brown on your side is a nice thing. TED Conferences on your side is a nice thing. Simon Sinek on your side is a nice thing. And it's being translated into multiple languages right now. That's the other thing I wanted to see, and it speaks to the universal definition of being human. And that's what's going on right now.
In terms of being human, you write about, I loved how you credited your wife, Meg, for what she did, because I think I failed to mention that you were in Secaucus, New Jersey.
Way too much.
Way too much. While your family was here, your wife and 3 children were up in Boston. So, she's a single mom during the week, so to speak, right? No one can tag out. And I loved how you acknowledged and celebrated and were so appreciative of the work that she had to do so you could be fulfilling your dream. And it made me wonder about how do you, and I know Meg is not a character, I know she's a human being, but as you're reading the book, these different people, they are characters because they're two-dimensional, but yet they're not, they're human beings. So how do you write sensitively about your family, and we learn a lot about your family in this book, coworkers. How do you write about them sensitively but honestly? How does that work when it's nonfiction?
Yeah, I think what you just said is really important. It was honest. It really was. I mean, it's very personal. There's some very painful parts in the book. I mean, there's a lot of loss. And they're both parents dying. My daughter almost died. Lots of me died during the book. It's really just telling the truth. There are things that I don't know. I think the book, and I think it's just truthful. I think that's one of the things that people can tell. I didn't really hold back a whole lot. There's the details that were necessary to really develop a person or to understand the impact that they had on me. Those details had to be in the book. Mm-hmm. And the protagonists in this book, and you know this, they're all women. Mm-hmm. It's the women of Ashley Stewart, it's my mother, and it's my wife. And then I'm like the bumbling Odysseus that sort of has a discovery and says, grow up, actually.
Before we open it up to questions, you said to me earlier that you hope that readers see themselves in this book. And my stepfather was like a father to me, and he passed almost 20 years ago. And on his headstone is I believe it's Thomas Campbell, a quote that says, "To live on in the hearts of those we love is never to die." And I couldn't help but think about the way your parents live on in the work that you do. And now their legacy is extending even further. It's like this beautiful ripple effect, James, and it's all such a gift. Sharing your parents' story, why they left Korea, sharing your story, the stories of the women of Ashley. It's just a gift, and I know it sounds so corny, but it really is the kind of gift that lasts. And I thank you for sharing.
These are just from 2 weeks ago. Book is being translated into Korean. I went there to pre-launch the book in Korea. And for those of you who read the book, this will bring it to life. That is my family's, my dad's side tomb. And my uncle, who's a minister, read the portions of the book about my dad visiting that tomb to my dad. My dad and mom would have been buried here if they had not immigrated. And then I taught down here at my mom's alma mater at her College of Nursing using the Korean translation of the book. I brought both diplomas to Korea. They hadn't been in Korea since 1964. And both diplomas made their way back to their respective universities. My dad's reunion from Seoul National University Medical School happened to be that week. This was their 60th reunion. And so I gifted draft Korean translations to his 3 best friends, and they held up a picture of my dad in the picture. I mean, it's these things, the book talks a lot about serendipity, but I do believe if you live an intentional life that creates reinforcing loops, serendipity happens more often. I was supposed to be there that week. I know I was. And it's just, I could feel my parents every day, those 2 weeks. And so they're gonna live forever. And I wrote in the, the acknowledgments, I wouldn't have written this book but for my parents. And then also, the beauty of it, I wanted to say thank you to the women at Ashley Stewart who were the only ones who believed in me. And so for them, they deserve to live forever, and they will now.
Beautiful. Other questions?
And after the questions, and we turn off the film, I have a bonus for you all. I created a 3-minute movie for the Korea trip, so you can see you'll see the movie that is the book with music, but it's just for this audience who came.
Questions for James, wonderings.
I have a question. You were talking about how maybe it was your mindset is like a helicopter. Was it always that way, or was it like a plane and then it shifted?
I think inside I was a helicopter, but I was thinking that I needed to be an airplane. And I'm like, it doesn't feel right. And they were also, a lot of other things didn't feel right, but, there are parts of this book, it's also me understanding my parents. It took me 40 years to really understand. And it took a group of women who looked nothing like me or my mother to actually teach me that. So there are a lot of things as a young person, you'll see, a lot of this message is, and particularly for women, because women are penalized for trusting their intuition. We live in a very deductive, everything's has to be scientifically proven deduction. We're living in a time of chaos. In chaos, intuition is the most valuable. I mean, Einstein writes essays about the power of intuition. We've convinced ourselves to not trust your intuition, whereas intuition is the highest form of genius. So trust your intuition, but then also like have soft cartilage of deduction around it. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
Yeah, that's kindness in math.
No, yeah.
Yeah. You guys want to see the movie?
Sure.
All right. Bye, everyone.